The manager shoved the waitress in front of everyone during dinner rush. She thought no one cared enough to help. 10 minutes later, 8 military bikers pulled up outside. They'd made a promise to her father years ago, and they never break their word. The dinner rush at Romano's Steakhouse hit like it always did, fast, loud, and unforgiving. Lily Martinez moved between tables with practiced efficiency, balancing 3 plates on her left arm while refilling a water glass with her right. She'd worked here for 2 years, long enough to know every squeak in the kitchen door and every crack in the tile floor. Long enough to recognize when trouble was brewing. And tonight, trouble had a name. Vincent Russo, the floor manager. "Where's Table 7's appetizer?" Vincent's voice cut through the dining room chatter. He stood near the kitchen entrance, his face flushed red, jabbing a finger at Marcus, the 17-year-old busboy who'd started 3 weeks ago. Marcus fumbled with a tray of dirty dishes. I don't know, sir. I just clear the tables, the kitchen." "Don't give me excuses." Vincent's voice rose higher. Several diners turned to look. "You think you can stand around doing nothing while we're slammed?" Lily set down her plates at table 12 and moved toward them. She'd seen this before. Vincent had a pattern. Find the youngest, newest employee and make them the target when things got stressful. Last month, it was Sarah, a college student who quit after 1 week. The month before, it was a prep cook who simply stopped showing up. Marcus's hands trembled as he tried to stack plates. One slipped, clattering against the tray. "Now you're breaking dishes." Vincent stepped closer, his face inches from the boys. "You're going to pay for every single Vincent." Lily kept her voice calm, steady. "Marcus is doing fine. Table 7's appetizer is delayed because the fryer's backed up. I checked with Tony 2 minutes ago." Vincent's head snapped toward her. "Did I ask you?" "No, but the customers can hear you and we're in the middle of service." She gestured subtly toward the dining room where at least a dozen faces were now watching the scene unfold. "Maybe we should handle this in the back." For a moment, Vincent's expression shifted. Something between embarrassment and rage. The dining room had gone quieter. Even the kitchen sound seemed to dim. Then he moved. Not a punch, not a slap, but a sharp, frustrated shove with the flat of his hand against her shoulder. Lily stumbled backward, her hip connecting hard with the corner of the hostess stand. The impact sent a menu holder crashing to the floor, papers scattering across the tile. The restaurant froze. A fork clinked against a plate somewhere. A child's voice asked a question, quickly shushed. But mostly there was silence. The terrible suspended silence that follows when a line has been crossed and everyone knows it. Lily straightened slowly, one hand pressed to her hip. She didn't cry out, didn't yell. She just looked at Vincent with an expression that wasn't quite shock, wasn't quite anger, more like confirmation of something she'd long suspected. "You need to walk away right now," she said quietly. Vincent blinked as if suddenly realizing what he'd done. His mouth opened, closed. "I didn't. You were in my way." "Walk away," he did. Without another word, Vincent turned and disappeared into the kitchen, the door swinging shut behind him. The dining room exhaled collectively. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. Marcus stood frozen, still holding his tray, looking at Lily with wide eyes. "You okay?" she asked him. He nodded quickly. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." She bent to gather the scattered menus, wincing slightly as her hip protested. "Just finish clearing table 4, then take your break." "You've earned it." As Marcus hurried away, Lily felt the weight of eyes still on her. Most diners had returned to their meals, but not all. Near the counter in the corner booth, usually reserved for single diners, an older man sat watching her with an intensity that made her pause. He was probably in his 60s, with silver gray hair and a weathered face that suggested a life spent outdoors. He wore a simple denim jacket over a dark shirt. Nothing remarkable, nothing that would normally draw attention, except for the way he was looking at her now. Not with pity, not with curiosity, with recognition. Lily turned away, returning to her tables, forcing a smile she didn't feel. Her hip throbbed. Her hands wanted to shake, but she wouldn't let them. Not here, not in front of everyone. 20 minutes later, as she cleared table 9, she noticed the older man approaching the register. She was closer to it than the hostess, so she moved to help him. "How was everything?" she asked, falling into the script automatically. He handed her exact change, plus a $20 tip. Far too much for a single burger and coffee. The food was fine. She looked at the 20, then at him. "This is too much." "No," he said simply. "It's not." Their eyes met. Up close, she could see details she'd missed before. The small pin on his jacket collar, an American flag with an eagle, the faint scars along his knuckles. The way he stood, weight balanced, aware of his surroundings. "You didn't deserve that," he said quietly, his voice rough but kind. "What happened earlier? You didn't deserve it." Lily's throat tightened unexpectedly. All evening she'd held it together, but 4 simple words from a stranger threatened to undo her composure. "Thank you," she managed. He nodded once, then turned toward the door. She watched him go, watched him step out into the parking lot where the evening sun was just beginning to set. She didn't see him stop beside a motorcycle, didn't see him pull out his phone, didn't hear him say in that same quiet, steady voice, "This is about John's daughter. You'll want to come." But 10 minutes later, everyone would hear what came next. The rumble started low, like distant thunder on a clear evening. Lily was refilling coffee at table 3 when she first heard it. A deep rhythmic sound that seemed to roll up from the street and press against the restaurant's windows. The customer she was serving paused mid-sentence, head tilting toward the noise. "What is that?" someone asked from across the room. The rumble grew louder, closer, not chaotic or aggressive, but synchronized, purposeful. The kind of sound that made conversations stop and hearts beat faster. Through the wide front windows, Lily saw them arrive. Motorcycles. Not 1 or 2, but 8 of them rolling into the parking lot in a precise formation. They moved together like a single organism, their engines creating a symphony of power that vibrated through the restaurant's walls. Chrome gleamed under the parking lot lights. Leather jackets caught the last rays of sunset. The bikes came to a stop in a perfect line facing the restaurant entrance. Then, as if choreographed, the engines cut off simultaneously. The silence that followed was somehow louder than the noise had been. Inside Romanos, every diner had stopped eating. Forks hung suspended over plates. Conversations died mid-word. Even the kitchen staff had emerged to peer through the service window, trying to see what was happening. Lily stood frozen, coffee pot still in hand, watching as the riders dismounted. They moved with military precision, no wasted motion, no hesitation. 8 men, ranging in age from late 40s to mid-60s. Each wore a leather vest over their jacket, and even from inside, Lily could see patches and insignias she didn't recognize. Vincent appeared from the kitchen, his earlier aggression replaced by visible nervousness. "What the hell is this language?" muttered an elderly woman at table 5, but her eyes never left the window. The riders didn't storm toward the restaurant. They didn't shout or make threats. Instead, they simply stood beside their motorcycles, waiting. The man in front, tall, broad-shouldered, with a gray beard and dark eyes, crossed his arms and looked directly at the restaurant entrance. It was the older man from the corner booth, the one who'd left 10 minutes ago. "Should we call the police?" the hostess whispered, her hand hovering over the phone. "And tell them what?" Vincent snapped, but his voice cracked slightly. "That some guys on motorcycles are standing in our parking lot. They're not doing anything illegal." He was right. The riders weren't blocking the entrance, weren't threatening anyone. They were just there, waiting with the patience of men who'd learned long ago that presence alone could be a powerful thing. A family near the window gathered their children and moved toward the back of the restaurant. Another couple requested their check immediately. The atmosphere had shifted from curious to uneasy. Lily sat down the coffee pot carefully. Her hips still ached from earlier, but something else had taken over. A strange pull she couldn't explain. She moved toward the front door. "Lily, don't." Marcus grabbed her arm gently. "You don't know what they want." "I think I do," she said quietly, though she didn't understand why she believed it. Vincent stepped into her path. "You're not going out there. This is probably some kind of setup. Maybe you know these guys. Maybe this is all." "Move, Vincent." The coldness in her voice surprised even her. Vincent's mouth snapped shut. Whatever authority he tried to reclaim after the earlier incident evaporated under her stare. She walked to the door and pushed it open. The evening air was cooler than she'd expected. The parking lot lights had flickered on, casting long shadows across the asphalt. The 8 motorcycles sat silent and imposing, their riders standing in a loose semicircle. Lily stepped outside, the restaurant door closing behind her with a soft click. For a long moment, nobody moved. She could feel every eye from inside the restaurant on her back. Could sense Vincent watching from the window, probably trying to figure out how to spin this situation to his advantage. The gray-bearded man, the one who'd paid with the $20 tip, took a single step forward. Not threatening, not rushed, Just one step that somehow closed the distance between stranger and something else. Lily Martinez, his voice carried clearly in the quiet parking lot. She nodded slowly. How do you know my name? Your name tag, he said, gesturing to her uniform. Then his expression softened, but I knew who you were the moment I saw you. You have your father's eyes. The world tilted slightly. What? My name is Robert Chen. These men, he gestured to the writers behind him, we served with your father overseas. Afghanistan 2009 to 2011. In Lily's breath caught, her father John Martinez, the man in the photographs her mother kept on the mantle. The one who deployed when Lily was 14 and never came home. The one they buried when she was 16. Though the casket had been closed, the body too damaged from the IED blast. I don't understand, she whispered. We know you don't. Robert's voice was gentle but firm. That's why we're here. Your father saved our lives more than once. Before he died, he made us promise something. That if he didn't make it home, we'd watch over his family, his wife, his daughter. He paused, his jaw tightening. We've been keeping that promise for 9 years, Lily quietly. At a distance. But what happened in there tonight? He nodded toward the restaurant that crosses a line. And we think it's time you knew you're not alone. Lily's legs felt unsteady. You've been watching me. Not the way you're thinking. Robert's tone remained calm, reassuring. We check in with your mother every few months. Make sure the bills are paid if things get tight. Your car repairs last year. The mechanic who cut his price in half. That was us. When your mom had pneumonia 2 winters ago and someone anonymously covered her hospital copay. Also us. One of the other writers stepped forward. A shorter man with kind eyes and a limp in his right leg. We're not stalkers, kid. We're just keeping a promise to a brother who didn't make it home. Lily's mind raced through memories, moments that had seemed like luck or coincidence. The landlord who mysteriously agreed to defer rent when her mother lost her job 3 years ago. The grocery delivery that appeared on their doorstep during that brutal winter storm, unmarked and paid for. The college scholarship application that someone had told her about, perfectly timed, perfectly suited to her situation. All of you? She asked, looking at the 8 men standing in the parking lot. All of us, Robert confirmed. There were 12 of us in your father's unit. 4 have passed since we came home. But these 7 men, he gestured to the writers behind him. We all owe our lives to John Martinez. A tall black man with graying temples and a scar across his cheek spoke up, his voice deep and measured. Helmand Province, November 2010. We were pinned down by enemy fire, separated from our convoy. Your father was the squad leader. He could have waited for backup. Played it safe. Instead, he went back into the kill zone 3 separate times to pull out wounded men. Saved my life that day. Added a stocky writer with a Boston accent. Took shrapnel in his leg doing it. But he didn't stop until all of us were out. Robert nodded. He was a good soldier, better man. And when we rotated home and he stayed for another tour, his voice trailed off, the weight of old grief settling over his features. We all asked him why. He said someone had to make sure the next generation of soldiers had a good leader, someone who'd bring them home. He didn't bring himself home, Lily said quietly, and immediately regretted the bitterness in her tone. No, Robert agreed, meeting her eyes steadily. He didn't, but he brought 19 other men home alive on that last tour. The IED that killed him? He was leading a patrol, saw the disturbance in the road, realized what it was. Instead of freezing or running, he pushed 2 soldiers out of the blast radius. They lived because he moved first. The parking lot felt too small. Suddenly, the air too thin. Lily had heard the official story. Hostile action, immediate casualty, hero's death. But these details, these specific moments, painted a picture she'd never had before. Her father wasn't just a photograph and a folded flag. He'd been real, alive, making choices that saved lives. Why now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why reveal yourselves now? Robert's expression hardened. Because I sat in that restaurant tonight and watched a man put his hands on you. Watched him humiliate a kid who was just trying to do his job. Watched you stand up for that kid and get punished for basic decency. It was just a shove. It was assault, interrupted the man with the limp. And it wasn't the first time, was it? Lily looked away. He was right. Vincent had a history. She'd seen him grab a server's wrist once, squeeze hard enough to leave marks, seen him throw a plate that shattered inches from a prep cook's head. The staff knew to avoid him when he was in one of his moods, to keep their heads down and wait for the storm to pass. We made a promise to your father. Robert continued to watch over his family, to make sure no one hurt the people he loved. We've kept our distance because your mother asked us to. She wanted you to have a normal life, not one overshadowed by grief and warrior culture. We respected that. But Lily, you're 25 years old now. You're working in a place where you're not safe, where you're not respected. That's not okay with us. I can handle Vincent. You shouldn't have to. The words came from a lean rider with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. Your father didn't die so his daughter could be someone's punching bag. That's not handling it. That's surviving it. There's a difference. The truth of his words hit harder than Vincent's shove had. Lily realized she'd been surviving for a long time, surviving her father's death, surviving her mother's depression afterward, surviving underpaid jobs and disrespectful managers because that's just how things were. When had she stopped believing she deserved better? What do you want from me? She asked finally. Nothing, Robert said simply. We want to give you something. Information, support, the knowledge that you have people in your corner. What you do with that is your choice. We're not here to fight your battles. We're here to make sure you know you don't have to fight them alone. Behind them, through the restaurant windows, Lily could see Vincent pacing, his phone pressed to his ear. Other diners were gathering their belongings, preparing to leave. The evening that had started as just another shift had transformed into something else entirely. There's more you should know, Robert said, reading her hesitation. About your father? About us. About what we've learned regarding this restaurant and its management. Lily looked at the 8 men, these strangers who'd been guardian angels from the shadows. I'm listening. Lily didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small bedroom, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything Robert and the veterans had told her. They'd talked for nearly an hour in that parking lot about her father's courage, his humor, the way he'd keep everyone's spirits up during the worst deployments. They'd shown her photos on their phones, young men in desert camouflage, her father's face tanned and smiling, arm around Robert's shoulders, evidence of a life she'd barely known. But they'd also told her something else, something that made her stomach turn. Vincent Russo wasn't just a bad manager. He had a pattern. 3 former employees had filed complaints with the county labor board over the past 2 years. Wage theft, hostile work environment, 1 claim of physical intimidation. All 3 complaints had been quietly dismissed. The restaurant's owners, the Castellano family, had deep pockets and deeper connections throughout the county. The system protects them, Robert had said grimly. But systems can be challenged. We just need to be smart about it. Now, at 6:30 in the morning, Lily's phone buzzed on her nightstand. She grabbed it, expecting a text from her mother or maybe Marcus checking if she was okay. Instead, she saw an unknown number. The message was brief. Official notice. You are required to appear at the county sheriff's office today at 10 a.m. regarding complaint MAR 2547B. Failure to appear may result in warrant issuance. Her heart hammered. She read it 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Complaint. What complaint? A second text arrived from Marcus. Lily, did you see the news? Check Channel 7's website now. With shaking hands, she opened her browser and navigated to the local news site. The headline hit her like a physical blow. Steakhouse manager files assault complaint against employee. The article was short, posted just 20 minutes ago. Vincent Russo, floor manager at Romano's Steakhouse, filed a formal complaint yesterday evening alleging assault by employee Lily Martinez, 25. According to the complaint, Martinez verbally threatened and physically attacked Russo during the dinner shift. Sheriff's Department spokesperson confirmed Martinez has been ordered to appear for questioning. Restaurant management declined to comment, citing ongoing investigation. Lily's phone slipped from her hands onto the bed. This couldn't be real. She hadn't touched Vincent. He'd pushed her. There were witnesses. An entire dining room full of people had seen what happened. Her phone rang. Robert's number saved from last night. You've seen it, he said without preamble. He's lying. Robert, I didn't, we know. Listen carefully. This is a calculated move. He filed the complaint last night right after we left. He's trying to flip the narrative before you can establish yours. But there were witnesses. Witnesses who were eating dinner, who may not have seen the full context, who don't want to get involved. Robert's voice was steady, grounding. This is what powerful people do. Lily, they control the story. The Castellanos have the sheriff in their pocket. We verified that last night. Sheriff Tom Bradley has been photographed at their private parties. His campaign received significant donations from them 4 years ago. Lily felt dizzy. So what do I do? You go to that appointment. You tell the truth calmly and clearly. You don't get angry. Don't get defensive. And you don't go alone. I'm coming with you. So is David. He's a paralegal. Knows how these things work. They'll arrest me. Her voice cracked. They might detain you for questioning, but they won't arrest you. Not yet. They don't have enough, and they know it. This is intimidation, pure and simple. Vincent and the Costanos are betting you'll panic. Maybe quit, maybe leave town. They're betting you're alone and scared. I am scared? I know, but you're not alone. 3 hours later, Lily sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair at the county sheriff's office, Robert on her left, and David, the lean veteran with silver hair, on her right. The station smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. Wanted posters lined the walls alongside public service announcements. Sheriff Bradley emerged from a back office, his uniform crisp, his expression neutral. He was younger than Lily had expected, maybe early 50s, with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Martinez, thank you for coming in. He didn't acknowledge Robert or David. If you'll follow me, my associates will be joining us, Lily said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Bradley's smile tightened. This is a formal interview regarding a criminal complaint. Unless one of them is your attorney. I'm her legal advisor, David said smoothly. Paralegal certification, 15 years experience. I'm here to ensure her rights are protected during questioning. The sheriff's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he nodded curtly. Fine, this way. The interview room was exactly like the ones Lily had seen on TV. Gray walls, metal table, recording equipment in the corner. Bradley sat across from her, a thin folder open in front of him. Miss Martinez Vincent Russo has alleged that on the evening of November 9th, you verbally threatened him and physically struck him in front of customers and staff. What's your response to these allegations? Lily met his eyes. They're lies. Vincent pushed me. I have witnesses. Mr. Russo also has witnesses. Then we have a problem, David interjected calmly. Because one party is committing perjury. Bradley's expression hardened. This isn't a joke, Mr. Chen. David Chen. And you're right, Sheriff. This isn't a joke. It's a young woman being targeted for standing up to workplace abuse. The sheriff closed the folder with a sharp snap. Miss Martinez, don't leave town. We'll be in touch. As they left the station, Lily realized the battle had just begun, and Vincent had drawn first blood. The Veterans Hall sat on the eastern edge of town, a modest brick building with a gravel parking lot and an American flag that hung perfectly still in the morning air. Lily had driven past it 100 times without really noticing it. Just another community building in a town full of them. Now, as Robert's motorcycle led her car into the lot, she saw it differently. 3 other motorcycles were already parked near the entrance. The same ones from last night, she realized. The veterans hadn't gone home. They'd been preparing. This doesn't feel real, she murmured to herself as she killed the engine. Robert appeared at her car door before she could fully process where she was. Come on, there's something you need to see. Inside, the hall smelled like old wood and coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, illuminating a space that was part meeting room, part museum. Folding tables lined one wall. A small kitchen area occupied the corner. But what dominated the room were the walls themselves. Photographs, dozens of them, some in frames, others pinned directly to corkboards. Men in uniform spanning decades. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Faces, young and old, smiling and serious, alive and memorial. And there in the center of the Afghanistan section was her father. Lily's breath caught. The photo was larger than the others, professionally printed and mounted in a dark wood frame. Her father stood in desert camouflage, rifle slung across his chest, squinting slightly against the sun. But he was smiling, that crooked smile she remembered from her childhood, the one that meant he just said something either profound or ridiculous, and was waiting to see which one you'd figured out. Around him in the photo stood 7 other soldiers. Younger versions of the men who'd appeared in the parking lot last night. Helmand Province 2010, said a voice behind her. Lily turned to find the tall black veteran, the one with the scar on his cheek. I'm Marcus Turner, by the way. Same name as your bus boyfriend. Coincidentally, you're in this photo, Lily said, recognizing him immediately. Younger, no scar yet, but the same intense eyes. Front row, left side. That was 3 months before the ambush. Marcus moved to stand beside her, studying the photograph like he'd seen it 1,000 times, but never got tired of looking. Your father took this picture seriously. Made us all clean up, shave properly, stand straight. Said someday we'd want to remember we were soldiers, not just survivors. Robert joined them, carrying 3 cups of coffee. He was right. We had prints made for everyone in the unit. 4 of those men are gone now, but the rest of us. We look at this photo and remember why we made it home. David emerged from the kitchen area with a cardboard box. Lily, there's more. He set the box on the nearest table and began removing items carefully. Letters, a lot of them. Yellowed envelopes with military postage. Addresses in her father's handwriting. Your father wrote to each of us regularly, David explained. Even after his first deployment ended and we'd rotated home, he kept in touch. These, he gestured to the stack. These are just mine. Robert has more. Marcus probably has the most because your dad loved arguing politics with him. Marcus chuckled. Man could debate for hours, never raised his voice, never got personal. Just methodically dismantled every argument until you either admitted defeat or realized you'd both been agreeing the whole time. Lily picked up one of the letters carefully. The paper felt fragile, the creases deep from being folded and unfolded many times. She recognized her father's handwriting immediately, small, precise, slightly slanted. Marcus, you were right about the platoon needing better communication protocols. Implemented your suggestion last week. Saved us from a friendly fire incident on Tuesday. When you're right, you're right. Don't let it go to your head, John. It was so casual, so normal. Her father giving credit, showing respect, maintaining connection. These weren't the letters of a distant commander. These were letters between friends. He talked about you all the time, Robert said quietly. In every letter, every email, every satellite phone call when he could get access. Lily made honor roll. Lily joined the debate team. Lily wants to study hospitality management because she likes making people feel welcome. Lily's eyes burned. I didn't know he paid that much attention. He was always deployed, always busy. He was always your father first. Marcus corrected gently. Everything else was second. You know what his last email to me said? 2 days before he died. Lily shook her head, not trusting her voice. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolled through old emails, and turned the screen toward her. Marcus, Lily graduates high school in 2 years. Been saving combat pay for her college fund? If something happens to me, make sure she knows she can be anything she wants. Don't let anyone make her feel small. She's got the biggest heart in the world. That's not weakness. That's strength. Make sure she knows that, Jay. The tears came then, unstoppable. Robert handed her a tissue without comment. David looked away politely. Marcus just stood there solid and present. We're not telling you this to make you cry, Robert said after a moment. We're telling you because Vincent Russo and Sheriff Bradley and the Castellano family, they're betting you'll fold under pressure. They think you're alone. They think you're weak. He gestured to the photographs, the letters, the men standing in the hall. They're wrong on both counts. You're John Martinez's daughter, and we don't abandon family. By noon, everyone in town had heard something. The stories varied wildly depending on who was telling them. At Miller's Hardware, old Jerry swore he'd heard the waitress had connections to a motorcycle gang. At Sacred Heart Church, Father Dominican secretary whispered that poor Vincent Russo had been threatened by armed bikers. At the elementary school pickup line, mothers debated whether Romanos was even safe to eat at anymore. The truth, as always, got lost somewhere in the middle. Lily discovered this when she stopped at the grocery store on her way home from the Veterans Hall. She'd only meant to grab milk and bread, normal things, routine things, something to ground herself after the emotional weight of the morning. Instead, she got Carol Henderson. Carol had been Lily's mother's friend once years ago, before distance and life had pulled them apart. She stood in the produce section, examining tomatoes with the concentration of a jeweler appraising diamonds. Lily Carroll's voice was cool, her eyes not quite meeting Lily's. I heard about the trouble. It's not what people are saying. Vincent Russo's mother goes to my church. Carol set down a tomato with deliberate care. She's devastated. Says you attacked her son, and now some gang is threatening the whole restaurant. Her words, not mine. Lily felt her stomach tighten. Mrs. Henderson, I didn't attack anyone. Vincent pushed me. There were witnesses. Were there? Carol's eyebrows rose slightly because Vincent says you've been trying to undermine him for months. Says, you've been turning other employees against him, creating a hostile environment. The lies were so smooth, so complete that for a moment, Lily couldn't find words to counter them. This was Vincent's strategy. Establish the narrative first. Plant seeds of doubt. make people question what they thought they knew. That's not true, Lily said quietly. Not any of it. Carol picked up her shopping basket. I hope not, dear. For your mother's sake. She's been through enough without her daughter getting mixed up with criminals. She walked away before Lily could respond, leaving her standing alone in the produce section, hands trembling slightly. But not everyone believed Vincent's version. At the town diner, Mario's place, the breakfast spot that had been there since the 50s, Lily found unexpected support. She'd stopped in for coffee, needing caffeine, and maybe a friendly face, and found both in Annie Rodriguez. Annie had waitressed at Mario's for 30 years. She was 63, tough as boot leather, and had opinions about everything. She took one look at Lily and poured her a cup without asking. On the house, Annie said firmly. And before you ask, yes, I heard about Romano's. Also heard Vincent's version. Load of garbage, if you ask me. Lily blinked. You believe me? Honey, I've worked food service since 1982. I know a bad manager when I hear about one. And Vincent Russo has been bad news since the day the Costellanos hired him. Annie leaned against the counter, lowering her voice. He tried to poach 3 of our servers last year. Promised them better tips, better hours. No, what happened? 2 quit within a month. Said the environment was toxic. The 3rd one, sweet girl named Sophie. She came back here literally crying, begging for her old job back. What did Vincent do to her? Annie's expression darkened. Don't know exactly. She wouldn't say, but she had a bruise on her wrist that looked an awful lot like finger marks. Mario gave her job back, no questions asked. We don't play those games here. She refilled Lily's coffee without being asked. Point is, some of us know the truth. You're not alone in this, even if it feels like it. The town was splitting, Lily realized over the next few days. Not obviously. There were no protests or public confrontations. But the division was there, quiet and growing, like a crack in foundation that starts small and spreads. At the bank, the teller who usually chatted with Lily processed her transaction in silence, eyes down. At the gas station, the owner, Mr. Patel, asked if she was okay and mentioned he'd never liked that Russo boy. Anyway, at the library, Mrs. Chen, no relation to Robert or David, stopped Lily to say her nephew had worked at Romano's once and left after 2 weeks because of Vincent's temper. Small moments, small gestures, but they added up. The most surprising support came from an unexpected source, Father Dominican himself. He appeared at Lily's mother's house on Thursday evening, carrying a casserole dish and wearing his usual kind expression. I'm not here officially, he said when Lily answered the door. Just as a neighbor. May I come in? Over tea in the small kitchen, he spoke carefully. Carol Henderson told me what she said to you at the grocery store. I want you to know that her opinion isn't shared by everyone in our congregation. I've heard concerning things about Mr. Russo's behavior over the years. Multiple sources, reliable people. Why doesn't anyone speak up? Lily asked. Father Dominican sighed. Fear mostly. The Castanos donate significantly to many local organizations. People worry about consequences. But Lily, he looked at her directly. Fear isn't the same as loyalty. And silence isn't the same as agreement. There are more people on your side than you realize. They're just waiting to see if it's safe to say so. After he left, Lily sat in the darkening kitchen, processing everything. The town was watching, waiting, choosing sides in a battle that hadn't been fully declared yet. She just hoped that when the real fight came, the people who believed her would find their voices. Because Vincent and the Costanos were just getting started. The first person to reach out was Sophie. Lily didn't recognize the name when the Facebook message appeared Friday morning. The profile picture showed a young woman with dark hair and a cautious smile, but it was the message itself that made Lily's heart race. Hi, Lily, you don't know me, but I used to work at Romano's. Annie from Mario's place told me what happened to you. The same thing happened to me. Can we talk? They met at a coffee shop 2 towns over, Sophie's suggestion. I don't want to run into anyone from Romano's, she'd explained over the phone. I know that sounds paranoid, but it doesn't, Lily had assured her. She understood perfectly. Sophie arrived 10 minutes early, already sitting in a corner booth when Lily walked in. She was 22, petite, with nervous hands that kept fidgeting with her coffee cup. The sleeves of her sweater were pulled down over her wrists. Thank you for meeting me, Sophie said quietly. I wasn't sure if I should reach out. But then I thought if I stay silent and something worse happens to someone else. What did Vincent do to you? Lily asked gently. Sophie's eyes dropped to her coffee. I worked there for 4 months last year. The money was good at first, better than most places. But Vincent, he had rules, weird, controlling rules. We couldn't talk to each other during shifts unless it was work-related. Couldn't eat food from the kitchen, even if it was going to be thrown out. Had to ask permission to use the bathroom. That's not legal, Lily said. I know that now. But I was 19, and it was my first real restaurant job. I thought maybe that's just how it was. Sophie pulled her sleeves up slightly, revealing faint yellow-green bruises on her left wrist. Old ones nearly healed. One night, I dropped a tray. Accident. Someone bumped into me. Vincent grabbed my wrist and dragged me into the kitchen. Squeezed hard enough that I couldn't feel my fingers. Told me I was clumsy and stupid, and if I cost him another plate, he'd make sure I never worked food service again. Lily felt cold anger settling in her chest. Did you report it? I tried. Went to the Castellanos directly. Mrs. Castellano listened, nodded a lot, said she'd look into it. 2 days later, Vincent cut my hours to 4 per week. All closing shifts. When I complained, he said my performance had been declining. A week after that, I just quit. I couldn't take it anymore. Sophie, would you be willing to write down what happened with dates, details? Sophie bit her lip. Will it help? I think it might. I think you're not the only one. Inch. She was right. By Monday, 3 more former employees had contacted Lily. Each had heard through the small-town grapevine that she was collecting statements. Each had their own story. Marcus, different Marcus, a line cook who'd worked at Romano's 2 years ago, described systematic wage theft. Vincent would edit our time cards, he explained during their phone call. You'd work an 8-hour shift, but your card would show 7.5. Happened every week. When I confronted him, he said I must have clocked out early and forgotten. But I had photos of the clock-in machine on my phone showing my actual times. He fired me the next day for insubordination. Jessica, a former hostess, told a story of constant verbal abuse. He'd call us stupid, worthless, incompetent. Always in front of customers, always meant to humiliate. I have anxiety now. Actual diagnosed anxiety that I didn't have before working there. My therapist says it's workplace trauma. Then there was Daniel, who'd been a server for 6 months. His story was the most disturbing. Vincent offered me extra hours once. Said I could work private parties the Castellanos hosted at their home. Good tips, he promised. But when I got there, it wasn't a normal party. The guests were inappropriate, making comments, getting too familiar. When I tried to leave, Vincent blocked the door. Told me I was overreacting, that this was part of the job. I pushed past him and never went back. Never got paid for that night either. Lily met with each person individually, always in public places, always with their explicit consent. Robert had provided her with a simple template, just the facts, dates, and specific incidents. No exaggeration, no emotional language, just clear documentation. By Wednesday evening, she had 5 detailed statements. Each one painted the same picture. Vincent Russo was not just a bad manager. He was abusive, manipulative, and protected by employers who either didn't care or actively enabled his behavior. The veterans helped organize everything. David created a file system chronologically ordered with copies stored in multiple locations. Marcus, veteran Marcus, compiled a timeline showing the pattern of complaints, terminations, and incidents spanning 3 years. This is substantial, David said, reviewing the material spread across the Veterans Hall table. But we need to be careful about how we present it. The Castellanos have lawyers, good ones. They'll attack the credibility of everyone involved. They'll say we're all disgruntled former employees with an axe to grind, Sophie said quietly. She'd become a regular presence at the hall over the past few days, finding strength in numbers. Robert nodded. They will, which is why we need more than statements. We need documentation. Pay stubs, time cards, medical records, anything that corroborates these stories. I kept everything, Marcus said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. When Vincent started messing with my hours, I knew something was wrong. I have every pay stub, every time card photo, every text message he sent. I've had them in a box in my garage for 2 years, waiting for, I don't know this, I guess. Lily looked around the table at these people, strangers a week ago. Allies now. We're really doing this? We are, Robert confirmed. And we're going to do it right. The work began in earnest on Thursday morning. Robert had transformed the Veterans Hall into a makeshift operations center. 2 folding tables now held neat stacks of documents, each labeled and organized by category. Pass stubs, time cards, text messages, photographs, witness statements. A large whiteboard mounted on the wall displayed a timeline of incidents spanning 3 years. We do this by the book, Robert said, addressing the small group assembled in the hall. Lily, the 5 former employees, and 4 of the veterans. No confrontations, no threats, nothing that could be twisted against us in court. Everything we gather has to be obtained legally and documented properly. David, in full paralegal mode, distributed manila folders to each person. These are request forms for your own employment records. Under state law, former employees have the right to copies of their personnel files, including disciplinary records, time cards, and pay history. Romanos has 30 days to comply, but they usually respond faster to avoid penalties. What if they refuse? Jessica asked. Then they're breaking the law, and that becomes additional evidence. David's smile was thin. The Castellanos are arrogant, but they're not stupid. They'll comply with the basic requests. Marcus, veteran Marcus, had spent the previous evening making calls to former colleagues from his police liaison days. I reached out to a contact at the state labor department. He explained the situation in general terms. Didn't name names yet. They said if we can show a pattern of wage violations across multiple employees, they'll open an investigation. But we need hard numbers documentation. Former employee Marcus, they'd started calling him Cook Marcus to avoid confusion, opened the box he brought from his garage. Inside were dozens of documents meticulously organized in labeled folders. 2 years of evidence, he said, spreading them across the table. Every discrepancy, every shorted hour, every suspicious pay adjustment. Lily picked up one of the pay stubs. The math was obvious once you looked closely. Hours worked 42, hours paid 385. Week after week, the same pattern. Small enough that most people wouldn't notice or wouldn't think it worth fighting over. But multiplied across months across multiple employees, it added up to thousands of dollars. This is systematic theft, she said quietly. It's wage fraud, David corrected, which is a criminal offense, not just a civil matter. If we can prove Vincent did this knowingly and repeatedly, he's looking at actual criminal charges. Sophie had brought something else, her medical records. The documentation from her urgent care visit after the wrist-grabbing incident. I didn't press charges then, she said, her voice steadier than it had been days ago. I was scared and just wanted to forget about it. But the doctor noted the bruising pattern was consistent with forceful gripping. It's in my file. Robert photographed each document carefully with a high-resolution camera, creating digital backups. We're building a case, but we're also building insurance. Multiple copies stored in different locations. They can't destroy evidence they don't know exists. The breakthrough came on Friday afternoon. Daniel, the former server, had been quiet most of the week, attending meetings, but contributing little. Now he arrived at the hall carrying a laptop and wearing an expression that was equal parts nervous and triumphant. I found something, he said, opening the laptop on the table. Remember I told you about that private party? The inappropriate one Vincent sent me to. Everyone nodded. I couldn't prove what happened. It was my word against theirs. But I remembered something. The Castellanos' house has security cameras, expensive ones. I saw them when I was there. He turned the laptop screen around, so I started thinking about the restaurant. They have cameras there, too. In the kitchen, the storage room, the office. Lily's pulse quickened. The night Vincent pushed me happened right in view of the main floor camera. Daniel finished. I know because I worked there for 6 months. I know exactly where every camera points. The Castanos would never give us that footage, Jessica said. No, David agreed slowly, his eyes on the laptop screen. But they're required by law to maintain security footage for a certain period. And if that footage contains evidence of a crime, tampering with or destroying it is a felony. Robert leaned forward. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we make a formal request for that footage through proper legal channels. File it officially with specific date and timestamps. That creates a legal obligation for them to preserve it. If they destroy it after receiving our request, they're guilty of evidence tampering. Lily felt a spark of hope. The footage from last week from the incident with Vincent, it would show exactly what happened. It would, David confirmed. But there's more. If those cameras run continuously, they've likely captured other incidents too. Other employees being mistreated. The question is whether we can get access to it. Veteran Marcus pulled out his phone. I have an idea about that. My contact at the Labor Department. If they open an official investigation, they have the authority to subpoena security footage as part of their inquiry. The Castellanos can't refuse a state investigation. But we need enough evidence to trigger that investigation first. Robert said, We have it. Cook Marcus gestured to the spread of documents covering the tables. 5 employees, 3 years of wage violations, documented medical evidence of assault, and a clear pattern of retaliation against anyone who complained. That's enough to start an investigation. David was already drafting the complaint on his laptop. We file with the State Labor Department on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, Romanos will be notified they're under investigation. By Tuesday, they'll be scrambling to cover their tracks and we'll be watching to make sure they don't, Robert added. Lily looked around at the faces in the hall. People who'd been strangers days ago, now united by shared experience and common purpose. They weren't looking for revenge. They were looking for accountability. When this goes public, she said quietly, Vincent and the Castanos are going to fight back hard. Let them, Sophie said, and there was steel in her voice that hadn't been there before. We have the truth and we have each other. The reporter's name was Michelle Nguyen, and she'd been covering local news for Channel 7 for 6 years. She was young, sharp-eyed, and according to Robert's research, she had a reputation for stories that made powerful people uncomfortable. 2 years ago, she'd exposed a county commissioner's misuse of public funds. Last year, her investigation into substandard nursing home conditions had led to state intervention at 3 facilities. She's good, Robert had said when he'd suggested reaching out. And she doesn't back down from pressure. Now Michelle sat in the Veterans Hall, her cameraman setting up equipment in the corner while she reviewed the documents spread across the table. She'd been reading for 20 minutes, occasionally making notes, her expression growing more serious with each page. This is substantial, she said finally, looking up at Lily and the former employees. 5 people with consistent stories, documentation of wage theft, medical records, a clear pattern of retaliation. This isn't just one bad manager. This is systemic abuse. Will you cover it? Sophie asked quietly. Michelle set down the papers. Yes, but I need to be clear about what this means. Once this story airs, there's no taking it back. The Costos will come after your credibility. They'll dig into your backgrounds, looking for anything they can use to discredit you. Vincent will probably claim this is a coordinated attack. Are you prepared for that? Lily glanced at the others. Cook. Marcus nodded firmly. Jessica's hands trembled slightly, but she met Michelle's eyes and said, Yes, Daniel and Sophie exchanged looks. Then both indicated their agreement. We're prepared, Lily said. We've been dealing with their intimidation for years. At least this way people will know the truth. Michelle nodded slowly. Okay, then let's do this, right? I want to interview each of you separately on camera. You'll tell your stories in your own words. No script, no rehearsal, just honest accounts of what happened. I'll also need to contact Romanos for their response. They'll deny everything, but journalistic ethics require we give them the opportunity to comment. When will this air? Robert asked. If we film today, I can have it ready for the 6:00 news on Monday. That gives me the weekend to put together the package, verify facts, and clear it with my editor. Michelle paused. I should warn you, my editor will be cautious about this. The Castellanos advertise with the station, but if the story is solid, he'll run it. He has to. The interviews took 3 hours. Lily went first, sitting in a folding chair with the Veterans Hall wall behind her. The camera felt intrusive, but Michelle's gentle questions helped her relax. Tell me what happened the night of November 9th, Lily did. She described the dinner rush, Vincent's treatment of Marcus, the busboy, her attempt to intervene, and the shove. She kept her voice steady, her facts clear. How did that make you feel? Michelle asked. Humiliated, angry, but mostly just tired. Tired of watching him treat people that way, and knowing nothing would change. Why didn't you report it to his supervisors? I did. 2 months ago, I reported a different incident to Mrs. Castellano. She thanked me for bringing it to her attention and said she'd handle it. Nothing changed. Vincent's behavior got worse. Sophie's interview was harder to watch. She cried twice while describing the wrist-grabbing incident, but she pushed through, showing her faded bruises to the camera. Cook Marcus presented his evidence methodically, walking Michelle through pay stubs and time cards, pointing out each discrepancy. This wasn't a mistake, he said firmly. This was theft. Calculated, repeated theft from people who couldn't afford to lose a single hour's pay. By the time Daniel finished his interview, describing the inappropriate private party and Vincent's blocking the door, Michelle's cameraman looked visibly angry. This is one of the worst cases I've covered, Michelle admitted after the cameras stopped rolling. And I've covered some bad situations. Sunday evening, Michelle called Lily. The story is ready. My editor approved it. It airs tomorrow at 6, I should tell you. I contacted the Castellanos and Vincent for comment. What did they say? Mrs. Castellano declined to comment on camera, but issued a written statement calling the allegations false and defamatory. Vincent's statement was more aggressive. He claims you're a disgruntled employee who organized a smear campaign after being disciplined for poor performance. Lily's jaw tightened. That's a lie, I know. And I made that clear in the story. But Lily, you need to prepare yourself. When this airs, things are going to move fast. Monday at 6:00 p.m., Lily sat in her mother's living room surrounded by the veterans and former employees. Her mother had insisted on making coffee and cookies her way of coping with stress. The news segment was 7 minutes long. It opened with Michelle standing outside Romano's Steakhouse. A popular local restaurant is facing serious allegations of workplace abuse and wage theft from multiple former employees. Tonight, 5 people are breaking their silence about what they say is a pattern of misconduct that spans years. Then came the interviews. Lily watched herself on screen, barely recognizing her own voice. Watched Sophie show her bruises. Watched cook Marcus explain the wage theft with damning clarity. Michelle's narration was professional, but pointed. Channel 7 reached out to Romano's management for comment. They denied all allegations but declined to provide documentation or agree to an on-camera interview. The segment ended with Michelle's closing statement. The State Labor Department confirmed to Channel 7 that they have received a formal complaint regarding Romano's Steakhouse and will be opening an investigation. We'll continue to follow this story as it develops. The living room was silent for a moment after the segment ended. Then Lily's phone began to ring and ring and ring. The call started within minutes of the broadcast ending. Former coworkers Lily hadn't spoken to in months. Customers who'd witnessed incidents at the restaurant, other food service workers from around the county who had their own stories about Vincent or the Castellanos. Lily's phone buzzed so constantly that she finally had to silence it and just watch the notifications pile up. But the most important call came Tuesday morning at 8:15. Miss Martinez, this is Inspector Paula Hendress from the State Labor Department. I'm the lead investigator assigned to your complaint against Romano's Steakhouse. I need to schedule a formal interview with you and the other complainants. Lily's hand tightened on her phone. When today, if possible. This case has been flagged as priority given the media coverage and the severity of the allegations. We're also executing an unannounced inspection of the restaurant this morning. By 9 a.m., 3 official vehicles were parked outside Romano's Steakhouse. 2 inspectors from the Labor Department, 1 from the Health Department, and a county tax auditor. They'd arrived without warning, as was their right under state law. Lily heard about it from Annie at Mario's place, who'd heard it from a regular customer who drove past on his way to work. They're going through everything, Annie reported gleefully over the phone. Financial records, employee files, kitchen logs. Vincent's been pacing around outside like a caged animal. The Costos showed up with their lawyer about 20 minutes ago. The formal interview took place at the Labor Department's regional office. Inspector Hendress was a woman in her 50s with gray streak hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse and lie in existence. She interviewed each complainant separately, recording every statement, requesting documentation for every claim. When it was Lily's turn, Ricks got straight to the point. The security footage from November 9th, we've subpoenaed it. The restaurant initially claimed the system was malfunctioning that evening, but our technical consultant examined their equipment this morning. The system was functioning perfectly. They have the footage. Lily's heart raced. Can they refuse to turn it over? They can try, but obstruction of a state investigation is a serious crime. Their lawyer knows that. Chris leaned forward slightly. Miss Martinez, I want you to understand something. This investigation isn't just about your complaint anymore. In the past 24 hours, we've received 11 additional complaints from other former Romano's employees. The health department found multiple violations during their inspection. Improper food storage, equipment maintenance issues, inadequate employee facilities. The tax auditor discovered discrepancies in their payroll reporting that suggest they've been under-reporting wages to avoid tax obligations. How long will the investigation take? Normally weeks or months, but given the volume of evidence and the clear pattern of violations, we're expediting this. The restaurant has been issued a notice of non-compliance. They have 72 hours to provide all requested documentation and correct all immediate safety violations, or will recommend their operating license be suspended. 3 days later, Romano's Steakhouse sat dark and empty. The notice posted on the front door was official, stamped, and devastating, closed by order of the State Labor Department pending investigation. No entry without authorization. Lily stood in the parking lot staring at the sign. Robert stood beside her, his expression carefully neutral. They failed the compliance deadline, he said quietly. Couldn't produce clean payroll records because they don't exist. The security footage they finally turned over. It showed exactly what you said happened. Vincent pushing you stumbling into the hostess stand. Also showed 3 other incidents from previous months they'd conveniently forgotten to mention. What happens now? The Labor Department's report goes to the county prosecutor. They'll decide whether to file criminal charges against Vincent for wage theft and assault. The Costanos are facing massive fines and a potential civil lawsuit from the collective employees. Their business license is under review, Robert paused. It's over, Lily. They lost. The news came Thursday afternoon. Vincent Russo had been arrested. The charges were extensive. Multiple counts of wage theft, assault, intimidation of witnesses, and falsifying records. His bail was set at $50,000. The Costellanos paid it immediately, but the damage was done. Their restaurant was closed, their reputation destroyed, and their legal bills mounting by the hour. Michelle Nguyen's follow-up story aired that evening, showing footage of Vincent being led from the sheriff's office in handcuffs. Her report was thorough and unsparing. Vincent Russo, former manager of Romano Steakhouse, was arrested today on multiple charges stemming from an investigation that began with one waitress's courage to speak up. The state's investigation revealed systematic wage theft affecting at least 16 employees over 3 years, totaling an estimated $60,000 in stolen wages. The restaurant remains closed, and sources say the Castellano family is considering permanent closure rather than face the cost of remediation and legal settlements. Lily watched the report from the Veterans Hall, surrounded by the people who'd made this possible. Sophie was crying, but this time from relief. Cook Marcus looked vindicated. Jessica managed her first genuine smile in days. "We did it," Daniel said quietly. "We actually did it." "You did it," Robert corrected, looking at Lily. "You started this. You refused to accept that abuse was just part of the job. That took real courage." Lily shook her head. "I couldn't have done it alone." "No," Robert agreed. "But that's the point. You weren't alone. Your father taught us that nobody fights alone. Nobody survives alone. We're stronger together." 3 weeks later, Romano's Steakhouse closed permanently. The building went up for lease. The equipment was sold at auction, and the Castellano family quietly settled with their former employees for an undisclosed sum. Vincent Russo's trial was scheduled for spring, but Lily wasn't thinking about the past anymore. She was thinking about the future. The for lease sign went up on a gray January morning. Lily hadn't meant to drive past Romano's. She'd taken a different route to the grocery store specifically to avoid it, but road construction had forced a detour. And suddenly there it was, the building that had defined so much of her life for 2 years, now sitting hollow and silent. She pulled into the parking lot without really deciding to. The space looked smaller somehow, diminished without the cars and the noise and the constant motion of service. The windows were dark. Someone had removed the Romano's sign from above the entrance, leaving behind a clean rectangle on the brick where the paint was brighter, untouched by weather and time. A few scattered leaves had collected near the door. Lily sat in her car for a long moment, engine idling, staring at the building. She'd expected to feel satisfaction seeing it closed. Victory, maybe. Instead, she felt something more complicated. A mixture of relief and sadness and the strange emptiness that comes with finishing a chapter you'd wanted to end, but hadn't quite prepared yourself for. Her phone buzzed. "Robert, you okay? David said he saw your car at Romano's." Of course, David had seen her. The Veterans Hall was only 2 blocks away, and the veterans had developed a protective habit of keeping a general awareness of where she was. Not intrusive, just present. She texted back, "Just looking. Didn't realize I'd feel this way. Want company?" "Yes." Robert arrived 5 minutes later on his motorcycle, the familiar rumble announcing his presence before she saw him. He parked beside her car, dismounted with practiced ease, and leaned against her passenger door. "Can I come in?" he asked through the window. She unlocked the door. He settled into the passenger seat, not speaking, just sitting with her in the shared silence. "I thought I'd be happy," Lily said, finally seeing it closed. "But mostly I just feel tired." "That's normal," Robert said. "You've been running on adrenaline for weeks, fighting battles, gathering evidence, doing interviews. Now the fight's over and your body's finally processing everything you've been through." "Is it really over?" "The immediate crisis. Yes, Vincent's facing trial. The Costos are settling claims. The restaurant's closed. But the other part, the healing part, that takes longer." He gestured toward the empty building. "Want to go inside?" Lily blinked. "Is that allowed?" "Building's vacant. Technically still owned by the Costanos until the lease officially terminates, but they're not exactly monitoring it closely. And I happen to know the property manager. He pulled a key from his jacket pocket. David got it this morning. Thought you might want closure. They crossed the empty parking lot together, their footsteps echoing in the cold air. Robert unlocked the front door and it swung open with a creak that seemed too loud in the silence. Inside, Romanos looked like a restaurant frozen in time. Tables still set for service that would never come. Chairs positioned at precise angles. The hostess stand empty, its computer terminal dark. Someone had cleaned before they'd locked up. The floors were swept, the surfaces wiped down, but the space already had that particular quality of abandonment, like a theater after the audience has gone home. Lily walked slowly through the dining room, her fingers trailing along the back of a chair. This was where Table 7 had been over there. Table 12, where she'd been standing when she'd heard Vincent yelling at Marcus. The corner booth where Robert had sat that first night watching everything unfold. "Do you regret it?" Robert asked quietly, speaking up everything that followed. Lily considered the question seriously. The past month had been exhausting, stressful, sometimes frightening. She'd been called a liar, had her reputation attacked, had spent nights unable to sleep from anxiety. Her mother had worried constantly. The town had divided. Nothing about it had been easy. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it because even standing here, even feeling sad about how it ended, I know it had to end. This place was toxic. Vincent was hurting people. If I'd stayed silent, someone else would have been next." She moved toward the kitchen, pushing through the swinging door. The cooking line stood clean and empty, steel surfaces gleaming dully in the dim light filtering through the high windows. This was where cook Marcus had worked, where he'd first noticed his hours being stolen, where dozens of employees had labored under Vincent's abuse, accepting it as the price of employment. "You know what's strange?" Lily said. "I learned to be strong here. Not because of Romanos, but in spite of it. Every shift where I stood up for someone, every time I pushed back against Vincent's cruelty, I was practicing courage without realizing it." Robert smiled slightly. "Your father would be proud of you." "I think he'd be proud of all of us." She looked at Robert. "You kept your promise to him. You protected his daughter, not by fighting my battles, but by teaching me I could fight them myself." They stood in the kitchen a moment longer, then walked back through the dining room. At the door, Lily paused for one last look. "Goodbye," she said softly to the empty space. Outside, the January sun had broken through the clouds, warming the air slightly. Robert locked the door behind them and pocketed the key. "There's something else," he said as they walked back to their vehicles. "That property I mentioned a few weeks ago, the small storefront for lease. It's still available. Owners willing to negotiate terms for the right tenant. Interested?" Lily stopped walking. "Robert, I can't afford. You have settlement money coming from the Costos. Not a fortune, but enough for a start. And you'd have investors," he grinned. 7 of them, all military veterans who believe in you." Lily looked back at the empty Romanos building, then forward at the street stretching ahead. "Show me the property," she said. 2 months later, on a bright March morning, Lily turned the key in the lock and opened the door to her own place. The sign above the entrance was simple. Lily's Cafe in elegant script with a small painted lily flower beside the name. Nothing flashy, nothing pretentious, just honest and welcoming, exactly as she'd envisioned it. Inside, morning sunlight streamed through the large front windows, illuminating walls painted in warm cream and soft sage green. Mismatched wooden tables, each one refinished by hand, filled the space with comfortable, lived-in charm. Local artwork hung on the walls, pieces from artists who'd needed a place to display their work and had agreed to rotating exhibits. A chalkboard menu stood near the counter, hand-lettered with the day's offerings, fresh-baked pastries, sandwiches made to order, coffee roasted by a family-owned business 3 towns over. But what drew the eye most was the photograph. It hung in a place of honor above the main counter, professionally framed in dark wood. Her father in his desert camouflage, surrounded by 7 younger men, Robert, Marcus, David, and the others who'd become her unexpected family. All of them smiling, caught in a moment of camaraderie that had survived deployments, years, and loss. Beneath the photograph, a small brass plaque read, "In memory of Sergeant John Martinez, who taught us that protecting others is the highest calling." This cafe stands on the foundation of his legacy. Lily stood behind the counter, tying her apron, simple black, embroidered with the cafe's logo, and took a deep breath. Her first day, her own business, her own rules. The door chimed as her first customer arrived. Sophie entered carrying a box of fresh flowers, her face lit with excitement. Morning delivery. I thought the tables could use some color. In the 2 months since Romano's closure, Sophie had transformed. She'd enrolled in community college, started therapy for her anxiety, and had begun working part-time at a local florist. The nervous girl who'd been afraid to make eye contact was gone, replaced by someone who smiled easily and spoke with confidence. "They're perfect," Lily said, admiring the simple arrangements of daisies and tulips. "Table 5 and 8 and 1 for the counter. Complimentary, obviously. Employee discount." Sophie grinned. "Wait, can I give myself a discount if I'm not actually an employee?" "You're a friend. That's better than an employee discount." The door chimed again. Marcus, busboy. Marcus, now in his senior year of high school, arrived in his school uniform, backpack slung over one shoulder. "I've got an hour before first period. Put me to work." Lily had hired him part-time for weekend and after-school shifts. Minimum wage plus tips, respectful schedule, and absolutely no tolerance for mistreatment from anyone. Help Sophie with the flowers, then you can set up the pastry case. Antonio's bakery delivered 20 minutes ago. By 7:30, the cafe had a steady trickle of customers. Annie from Mario's place stopped in for her morning coffee, checking out the competition, she'd said with a wink, though everyone knew she'd been Lily's biggest cheerleader. Father Dominican arrived with Mrs. Chen from the library, both ordering breakfast sandwiches and settling at a corner table with their books. At 8i, the rumble of motorcycles announced the arrival of the veterans. 7 bikes rolled into the small parking lot with their usual precision. Robert led the way, followed by Marcus, David, and the others. They'd made this a morning ritual. Coffee at Lily's cafe before starting their days. Some of them were retired, some still worked, but they all made time for this. They took their usual table near the window, a round 6-seater that Lily had designated as theirs without ever saying so explicitly. They ordered coffee, black for Robert, 2 sugars for Marcus, cream for David, and settled in with the easy comfort of men who'd shared foxholes and now shared breakfast. Lily brought their orders personally, setting down cups with practiced care. "Place looks good," Robert said, his eyes scanning the cafe with the same protective awareness he brought to everything. "Feels right." "It feels like home," Lily corrected. And it did. Not the home she'd grown up in, not the home her mother kept with her father's photographs and folded flag. This was something new. A home she'd built for herself with help from people who'd chosen to stand beside her. A young woman entered hesitantly, approaching the counter with a nervous expression. Lily recognized immediately. "Are you Lily Martinez?" "I am." "I saw you on the news." The story about Romanos. The woman's hands twisted together. "I work at a restaurant across town. My manager, he's like Vincent, and I don't know what to do." Lily sat down the coffee pot and gave the woman her full attention. "What's your name?" "Rachel." "Rachel, sit down. Let me get you some coffee and we'll talk." She glanced at the veterans' table. Robert nodded slightly, a silent offer of support if needed. This was why she'd opened the cafe. Not just to serve coffee and sandwiches, but to create a space where people felt safe. Where someone being mistreated could walk in and find allies instead of judgment. Where kindness wasn't weakness and standing up for others was expected, not exceptional. As Rachel settled at the counter and began to speak, Lily listened with the patience her father had taught her through his example, and the veterans had reinforced through their loyalty. Outside, the March sun climbed higher, warming the street. The cafe filled with conversation and the comfortable sounds of community. The photograph above the counter caught the light. 7 young soldiers and their sergeant frozen in a moment of brotherhood that had somehow impossibly stretched across years and lost to create something new. Lily's cafe wasn't just a business. It was a promise kept. It was a legacy honored. It was proof that sometimes when the right people stand together, justice isn't just possible, it's inevitable. And it was finally home. The end.